I do think that that portion of the hymnal which contains the songs of Advent and Christmas are the most well-known hymns we sing. And there are a group of them, and I think we've gotten through the whole bunch. Maybe next Sunday a couple more. But instead of picking and choosing, I said the whole bunch we're going to sing this season. So we did. Back as a kid in St. Paul, Minnesota, on a Saturday, you could usually find me on a streetcar going down to the public library to get a new stack of books. In those years, I was very interested in biographies, especially biographies of famous people as youth. There was a whole selection in the library of these books. They were either orange or reddish, and they were all telling the early stories of people like Abraham Lincoln and Mark Twain and Amelia Earhart and Robert E. Lee and Betsy Ross and all kinds. Anybody read those? There were a bunch of them. I think I read the whole thing on the streetcar going back and forth on a Saturday morning. What I got from that is that each of them gained fame and recognition as adults, but what was important was those earlier years, those growing up years, those youth years, as they began to be the people they began to be the people that they were. Okay, we'll leave it that way. My English teacher wife is not present this morning, and do not report. Well, if you wanted to write a book in that kind of a series about the childhood and youth of Jesus of Nazareth, you would have very, very little material from which to draw. There are 12 verses of Luke's gospel is all we have of the period of time between the birth of Jesus and when he is a full adult at the age of 30, beginning his ministry by being baptized by John the Baptist. So we could call that the birth narratives of Jesus, which have been the themes of these past services, chapter 1 of the story of Jesus. And the public ministry of Jesus we could call chapter 3. And this little snippet of 12 verses is chapter 2 of the story of Jesus, only found in Luke's gospel. It's a strange story, is it not? Did you like it the way I read it? It was a troublesome story of a trip to Jerusalem when he was 12 years old. 12 years old was the time of discernment in Jewish tradition. That's when adulthood was supposed to begin, the transition from being an irresponsible child to assuming the responsibilities of an adult. And the Jewish observances today of bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah are a continuation of that tradition. So Jesus, accompanied by parents and relatives, age of 12, make the trek down to Jerusalem, to the temple, to make sure that the observance is in a proper place in Jerusalem. And this is where the story becomes strange. And time to alert the child welfare folks. For they start on home, and they're a day away before they discover that the 12-year-old is missing. They don't know that until they stop for the evening rest. So they hurry back to Jerusalem, search for him for 3 more days before they discover he's in the temple, sitting among the wise religious folk. And like many parents, when they find him, they're both relieved and angry of what you have put us through. And Jesus replies in his offhanded way, well, you should have known where I'd be. I was with these important people talking about important things. And they go on home, and that's the last you hear of Jesus as anything from birth to age 30. Well, we can surmise a couple of things. It's the last time Joseph is mentioned in a biblical story. meaning that sometime between the ages of 12 and 30 of Jesus, Joseph died. And so the responsibility for taking care of the household fell upon Jesus. That since Joseph was a woodworker, a carpenter, probably that's the craft that Jesus learned as well and became the breadwinner for the family. So you wonder, in those 30 years, did Jesus show any signs of extraordinary giftedness? Did any miraculous things happen? There are some stories that float around about him bringing a dove back to life and so on, but they're extraordinary. Don't listen to them. This is just folklore stuff. You wonder if the people of the community expected him to be famous in any way. Was he an above average person in the synagogue school in Nazareth? No record of that. Seemingly there was nothing to set him apart, nothing to draw undue attention to him until he began his public ministry. And then he begins as an unknown, maybe precocious teacher, someone captivating, intriguing, provocative. But the new recognition as a 30-year-old comes as a surprise to everyone, with the possible exception of his mother. Mothers always believe the best about their children, deserved, earned, or not. So, let me switch from the chapter 2 story of the life of Jesus to the chapter 3 story of our lives. You may have been an extraordinary, exceptional child, a prodigy, a one-in-a-million genius, giving your parents ample reason to expect extraordinary achievements from you as you grew up. In this group, probably, yes. Most of us come from much more common roots. An interesting but not unusual grade school experience. The usual growing pains and dislocations of youth in those awkward teenage and early 20 years. The foolishness and folly that our parents endured and we survived, at times shaking our heads that we turned out as well as we've turned out. So all of that, I would say, could be wrapped up in what I'm going to call chapter 2, the fuzzy years, the uncertain years, the growing up years. But most of us are well now entrenched in the chapter 3 story of our lives, the adult years, the mature years. Our childhood has not significantly limited who we have become. We pretty much are the people we have decided to become. While decisions we have made in the past may have compromised some of the options we have now in our present, yet we do have the ability to craft the reality today that we choose to craft. This New Year's time is traditionally a time of self-assessment, time to take a step back and look perhaps in a mirror to see what we are seeing in ourselves. And in that self-assessment, we could blame some of the things that have happened to us in chapter 2 portion of our lives for what has happened to us in chapter 3, the person we've become. But finally, we turn out to be the people we have decided to turn out to be. Yes, a distant parent may be a part of your life story, and that continues to play a part. You could remember a mean third grade teacher who soured you on education in all forms. You could remember a cruel neighborhood kid who every time that kid saw you tried to beat you down into the dirt. Or there may have been a family move at a particular time in your life which disrupted everything that you knew about what was good about being a part of a family. You may be a middle child who didn't get much attention in the family dynamics. Or you could be a first or last child who received a lot of attention. You may have picked some questionable people to chum around with. Or perhaps you didn't take your schoolwork seriously enough at some important times. Perhaps you made some unwise employment decisions. All that may be a part of what I call chapter 2. And you may regret portions of that, but you still bear responsibility for how chapter 3 is being lived out day by day by day. I think it's important to relearn some of chapter 2 material. What happened back then? A couple of weeks ago in the adult class, I asked the people there to reflect back, where were you when you were 7 years old? What kind of a house did you live in? What were your siblings like, your parents? And then we said, what were your Christmas traditions like as a 7-year-old? I think it's important to get in touch with some of those early years, what was going on in your life and in your family's life. Good to reconnect with that vast memory bank that has helped to shape us in so many ways. But the bottom line is that some pretty amazing people have survived a pretty awful chapter 2. And they've created a pretty wonderful chapter 3, their adult life work. And some pretty sad people have had a pretty wonderful chapter 2, their childhood and youth advantages, and they threw it all away in the way they've been crafting chapter 3. And so the new year of 2016 is just a few days away, and we're going to be given this portfolio of new pages upon which something will be written. And lives will be shaped. Days will be invested. There are a myriad of decisions that you and I will be making day by day by day and week by week, which will finally add up to another year of living on this good earth. Chapter 2 is important, for it gives clues to the influences of our lives that still cling to us and are still part of us. But it's chapter 3 that is crucial. For it tells those around us of whom we have become, and it instructs them about what kind of influence we will have on them, because you live a public life, and people take some of their clues of their living from your living. And we are all bound in this task of representing and representing God's gifts of grace and love and hope and peace to the world about us. The world needs us to be good examples, to be the followers of Christ, decided to be influences for good in this world. Amen.